So let us discuss today about 24th November 2015 newspaper. The first article is related to the non-performance assets of the banks. Now the NPAs are increasing to 6% from the 5.2% in March. This increase is majorly due to the stagnation in few sectors and also the policy paralysis that has led to the delayed implementation of the projects, which has increased the stress on the revenues of these particular companies. The major sectors which are identified are power sector. So with regard to power sector, the government has launched this Uday scheme. The same with regard to iron and steel industry, it's majorly global. That is due to decrease in global demand. The iron and steel industry has facing huge difficulties. And you know the aviation sector. Now the consolidation is yet to take place in the aviation sector in India. And the Supreme Court judgments and environmental clearances played havoc with the mining sector. And the infrastructure and textiles, they have their systemic problems. So in this context, to revive these sectors, the government has brought in few steps, especially in revival of the infrastructure. It is trying to issue the 25 years bonds, that is restructured advances. In this context, the total stressed assets, they can be defined as gross NPAs plus restructured advances. The major challenge in India is, among the stressed assets, the public sector banks are worst exposed. So this is one of the most difficult problem which the Indian economy is facing now. So if you have asked me to list out the major challenges before the Indian economy, I will say the banking sector and accumulation of these NPAs in the banking sector. It is not only a problem in India, even it is a problem in China too. The next thing is, so with regard to the Food Security Act, we all know that the UPA 2 government, it has brought in the Food Security Act 2013. So as for this National Food Security Act, the center will provide for the necessary assistance to the states, grains to the states from Food Corporation of India. But the states have to take up various reforms measures in this context. One is, it has to digitalize all the paper documents related to the fair price shops. It has to display the list of beneficiaries, computerization of the target PDS, linking them with Aadhaar card, setting up of vigilance committees, door delivery of the food grains, constitution of grievance redressal cells, building the modern storage facilities. All these are the preconditions for the center to give advances towards the states. But many of the states did not take them forward. That is the reason why the implementation of the act is getting delayed. Now, all the states except the Tamil Nadu, they are willing to roll out the Food Security Act by April by fulfilling these prerequisites. But what is the problem with the Tamil Nadu? In these states, we have target public distribution system. But in Tamil Nadu, you have universal public distribution system. So under the universal public distribution system, identification of the beneficiaries is a very difficult task, because everyone is eligible to be a beneficiary under the universal PDS. So other than that, all the states are willing to take forward this. You can link this topic to the policy issues and implementation challenges in India. So here, the lack of coordination between the center and the states, the reform-oriented policies and the states' disinterest towards them, these are the major challenges in implementation. We need to just add up this point and we can quote the Food Security Act as an example. And now, ASEAN or ASEAN, that is Association of Southeast Asian Nations. Now, let me give you a brief about this. We all know that ASEAN has come into existence at the time of the Vietnam War. But however, after the collapse of the Soviet Russia, that is end of the Cold War, ASEAN took a different shape altogether. It is more now an economic union, or I will say, it is more an association of the economies towards increasing the trade between the countries rather than a political association. So then, ASEAN plus 3 was started. That ASEAN plus 3, it includes China, South Korea and Japan, the three East Asian countries. Later it was further extended to add 5 more countries, which includes India, Australia, New Zealand, United States, and finally thus Russia. It means now ASEAN as a group, it consists of the countries which are mostly the part of Trans-Pacific Partnership. The only country that is not a part is India over here. So in this context, we know that Prime Minister Modi has visited all the East Asian countries. So he also has pitched for the investments from these countries. But however, the realization of the investments on the ground, they are very little. So what might be the reasons for this? The reform agenda which the India has taken forward, there is a huge gap between the deeds and the promises which we are making. For example, the goods and services tax, which we consider as an important law in this framework, it was not passed till date. And the tax predictability is one major challenge in India. And also reform our banking sector reforms. So all these need to be streamlined to attract the investors. The ease of doing business index has shown certain improvement, but definitely it is not in line to attract the major investments. The government has to take forward the reform agenda. And the second challenge is the Trans-Pacific Partnership, in which most of these countries of ASEAN are the members, is attracting more investments rather than the outside. So what does it mean? Now the East Asian countries and Southeast Asian countries are looking more towards the East, towards the Trans-Pacific Partnership in which India is not a member. And finally, a lack of intellectual property agreements and also government pitching on renewable energy resources. All these things need to be soon realized to attract these investments. Our deeds have to match with your words. This is what is we need to talk about. And one more, the OECD countries, in their recent report, they talked about a dramatic global trade slowdown. Once the global trade slows down, it is going to create a huge impact, and most of the countries are going to revert back to the protectionist measures. So these have to be kept in mind by India, so that creating the local consumption and demand, they are also very much critical along with the attraction of the investments, promotion of the global trade destinations. Try to link this topic with export-oriented growth, growth-oriented export. What are the differences between these two concepts? And the next is with regard to 7th Pay Commission. There are certain hard facts in India. The civil servants are central or state government employees. They are paid very low when compared to the many of the developed and developing countries. In spite of this, any upward revision of their pay scales or salaries is attracting a huge criticism from India or from the citizens. So generally the citizens view the government in a negative stance, and any increase in the salaries or allowances for the government employees are seen as a money going down the drain. So one way we are pitching for the good governance and governance reforms that is bound to increase the workload. So in this context, without increasing the pay and allowances, we cannot expect them to deliver to the needs. So in this context, it has brought in certain comparison between India and the other countries. If you take about, after excluding these postal and railway employees, which are the departmental undertakings, India has around 4.18 lakh as the central government employees. It means that India has around 139 for a lakh of population. If you go to United States of America, for every lakh of the population, the total number of government employees are 668. So the salaries which we pay into take into consideration, they are not even 1/10 which is being paid in the United States. Added to that, the Seventh Pay Commission did not arbitrarily decide the salaries of these people. In 1957, there was Indian Labour Conference. It has set certain criteria. Based on that, every year, or else once in 10 years, the pay commissions revise the salaries. Now, the GDP, the stress on the GDP, understand that the stress is not more than 0.4%. As India moves on, as the growth of the economy sets in, the India can easily absorb this increase in the salary hikes. But along with this, the growing private sector and migration to private sector, increased competition, all these demand for a better pay structure to the government employees. In public administration, there is something called as equity theory. When an employee gets satisfied in an organization, so what the equity theory says is, an employee compares himself with his own work. He also compares with his peers within the organization and also the people outside the organization. So in this context, when he sees an inequality, he tries to balance that inequality by decreasing his work or by resorting to the other measures which can increase his income. So this clearly explains the growth of corruption and inefficiency in government. So if we want to expect better governance, it will be possible with better motivation, and money is still one of the strong motivation for the employees to do the work. But money is not alone. My meaning is the sufficient salary allowances and pay conditions. These are required for an employee to deliver his output. Next is the freedom of speech. Now it is related to the curbs which are being imposed on the press in the conflict areas. Recently in Nagaland, the Assam Rifles, it has issued a notice to the local 3 newspapers. It is related to the reporting of these papers on NSC and Kaplong faction. What it says is, under Unlawful Activities Prevention Act, these newspapers can be prosecuted. So what exactly is this? UAPA, it allows for the accountability of the press under the sovereignty of India, sovereignty and security of India. So there in the northeast, especially in the conflict zones, the press is sandwiched between the censorship of the government and between publicization or spreading of the views or favorable reporting by these extremist elements. So the intimidation from both the sides, it is going to kill the freedom of press and freedom of reporting in these areas. So it is the time the government has to look into these areas which are restricting the freedom of press and provide for the free operations. Now in this context, the institution which has to secure the freedom of press, that is Press Trust of India, it has been better described as a paper tiger. So we need to create the strong institutions in this particular area. That's what is the essence of this article is. Now the climate change. There are many fancy terms that have come up in climate change. Let us talk about this. We all know that there is Rio Earth Summit has happened. This Rio Earth Summit, it has recognized the climate change as an important problem, and UN framework to combat climate change. This particular thing has come up at the Rio Earth Summit. It has divided the countries into Annex 1 and non-Annex countries. Total 37 countries are Annex 1 countries. So these are considered as responsible for accumulation of the gases, the greenhouse gases. And these Annex 1 countries, they are supposed to take the responsibility to mitigate and also to decrease the accumulation of these gases. So under the Kyoto Protocol, they are given certain definite targets. So here the principle which was holding good is this: the polluter shall pay, and there are definite targets. These are Common but differentiated responsibilities. It means all the countries, they have a common goal, and this goal is divided based on the specific capacities of a country to follow the emission cuts. There are no such emission cuts to the non-Annex 1 countries or non-Annex countries. Kyoto Protocol specifically says that the Annex 1 countries, they have to reduce GHG emissions by 5% below the 1990 levels by 2012. So the Kyoto Protocol specifically talked about emission reductions by Annex 1 countries. What the non-Annex countries has to do, they have to take up the adaptability measures, and also they have to take care that the emissions do not increase on their side in their process of growth. But there are no specific targets delineated to them. So this is what is called as common but differentiated responsibilities and respective capabilities. Now, the Annex 1 countries, they started changing their view at a later date. Because the Bali roadmap after the Kyoto, the Bali roadmap has come up in 2007. What it has said is, along with the emission cuts, there has to be something called as the technology and financial transfers for these non-Annex countries to adopt to the climate change. Now, the developed countries want to bury this common but differentiated responsibilities that have started at the Rio Earth Summit. Now, then came at the Durban conference, that is INDCs. INDCs, it means they are intended nationally determined contributions. Under this, there is no common global target. So under Kyoto Protocol, they have to reduce 5% by 2012, 5% emissions as on 1990 by 2012. Under INDCs, there is no such a global goal. And the second thing is, there are no specific individual emission cuts by these Annex 1 or non-Annex countries. Every country has to declare its own contributions. So because of this, what is happening, whatever the countries have declared in total, it is only reducing the carbon emissions to such an extent that 800 billion tons of the carbon will get accumulated in the next 15 years itself. So now, let's understand what is called as a global carbon budget. With the global carbon budget, it means whatever the space of carbon that is left to be used on the earth, that is called as global carbon space that is available. This global carbon space is estimated to be around 1,500 to 2,000 billion tons. Now, in this available global carbon space, that is, the science declares that the temperature of the earth can only be increased by 2 degrees C. So before reaching to this temperature, what is the maximum emission we can make? That is what is global carbon reserve which we have. Now, developed countries, they want to use this carbon space to their advantage. So in this context, any compromises made by India on its share in the available global carbon space is going to hinder its development very negatively. Now, with existing INDCs, this global carbon space will be consumed, more than 75% will be consumed in the next 15 years. So, India has to pitch at the Paris conference to have its rightful share in the global carbon budget. That is what is this article's essence is. And the M.K. Narayanan's article, what it talks about is related to the Kashmir. From the UPA1, the tendency is towards providing liberal financial packages to the Kashmir to counter the growing alienation. So the development is seen as a solution to fight the alienation of the Kashmiris. That masked really the ground realities in the Kashmir. The PDP-BJP alliance, once it has come into power, it has complicated the scenario further. So in this context, what Narayanan argues is the growing extreme radicalism on the ground is not getting visible because of this lopsided view, and that is going to be more and more dangerous to India. And the growing influence of IS is going to make the region highly destabilized. IS greater plans involves Uzbekistan, Turkmenistan, Afghanistan, Pakistan, and also the northern India. So in that very plan, the Kashmir also fits in. So India has to awaken to this particular danger. And that is what is the suggestion given by the M.K. Narayanan in this article. So thank you very much. From today, I am going to give you these articles regularly to you. I am back to work. I had some examinations in between. That is the reason why I was not able to upload them. So thank you very much. All the best.